I will say this up front. I turned this movie off on first viewing, a few minutes in. And it was because I Like Movies is the 2022 film by writer-director Chandler Levack, and I had high hopes for this film just based on the trailer alone, which really feels like it's going to be a love letter to film geeks growing up with dreams of being the next big thing in movies. And this is still a thing today, especially in the filmmaking space here on YouTube. But the film takes place in the early 2000s, when digital cameras were not quite as available to young hopefuls. Back then, we were at the tail end of technology from my day, and people still wanted to learn film, celluloid, which meant a lot more determination and planning and really knowing what you wanted to do and set down on film. This story is still at the birth of consumer digital cameras, mini DV and that sort of thing I think they use in the film. It's not shot on that, but that's what the characters use. But the dream is the same, and the young film snob culture is sort of the same. Enter Lawrence Queller, a high school kid with somewhat unrealistic plans to escape his suburban Canadian destiny and go to the Tisch School of the Arts, a prestigious film school in New York City. To that end, he gets a job at the local blockbuster-ish chain here called Sequels to save up the $90,000 tuition at the time by next fall, mind you, and you begin to see where Lawrence is possibly removed a little bit from reality.
A lot of my favorite filmmakers went there, and I never really thought that I was good enough, but I've decided to bet on myself as an artist and a young man.
Cool.
So NYU costs $90,000 US, and I know you get 10 free rentals a week if you work here. So you don't have to tell me right now, but yeah, just know the stakes are very, very high for me.
Along the way, we get to see Lawrence's life a little bit. We meet his best friend, Matt, the two spending every Saturday night together watching SNL instead of hanging out with the so-called normal high schoolers. And this is a tradition they proudly call Rejects Night. And we meet his mom, a single parent, putting up with Lawrence's condescending, immature attitude at every turn. In a performance that frankly had me sold, being a parent myself, and the tolerance Lawrence's mom exuded most of the time with her son, who she obviously loves very much, was a bit familiar. But even love can't always contain a bit of anger now and then.
I just don't understand why you won't apply to Canadian universities.
Because I don't want to be like a Canadian filmmaker.
What about Adam McQueen or David
Cronenberg. Oh my God.
Where did he go?
No, Mom, I want to go to NYU.
Anyone else in your class going to NYU? Where are they going?
I don't know. They're probably going to go to like Guelph
Honey,
or something.
NYU
They're
is
idiots.
very expensive.
Tourism
We're
and
talking about
business
American
management.
Tuition. Do you happen to have like 90,000 US?
It doesn't cost that much.
We'll ask Jeeves when we get home how much it costs.
There's a moment early on where Lawrence says something infuriating that his mom just abides, although we can see the steam leaking out of her ears as she just lets it pass, lets it go by.
It's not a contest. Our lives are equally hard.
Her son is not a bad kid. We begin to see after a while, largely through her eyes. He's ungrateful, but because he doesn't know what it's like to be an adult yet, doesn't know what it takes, essentially, to put up with someone like him. If Lawrence is a bit spoiled, of course, it's maybe she who spoiled him. And after a time, this plays out in the film in a surprisingly nuanced turn of character and story that's a lot richer than what the film seemed like it was going to be going into it. I will say this up front. I turned this movie off on first viewing, a few minutes in. And it was because the character Lawrence was not who I thought I'd been sold in the trailer. He's grating, he's ungrateful, he's pretentious, and has a bit of that Dunning-Kruger arrogance that we tend to find irredeemable in people, unless it's an election year. But something made me go back and watch it. And I realize now that the director, Chandler Levack, was very astute in this, because it's the people around Lawrence who obviously love him, who always seem to tolerate him, that keep you tuned into this movie for almost the first third or so, while Lawrence only very slowly grows on you. A curiosity grows. Why do they put up with this guy? When Lawrence embarrasses his mom into leaving the room when he and Matt are watching SNL together, instead of storming off, she looks at his friend Matt and just asks, "How do you put up with him?" And Matt just shrugs. And you realize that these people have a shared history in dealing with Lawrence, and that there's more depth than we know to the characters here. And before long, we find out just what's bubbling under the surface.
I don't think the person that wants you to accept that $10,000 scholarship is trying to ruin your life. I think that person loves you and doesn't want you to be in debt. Can you give in just once?
No! I told you I'm holding out for NYU.
Okay, then I'm not driving you to work.
What?
I'm not.
No, you have to drive me. If I can't get to work, I'm gonna lose my job.
Option.
Seriously?
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes I think Dad killed himself because of you.
Yeah? You know what? I think it was smart. I would love to kill myself so I can get away from you.
She's a single mom. Lawrence's dad didn't leave. He killed himself. There was no enmity or issue that's discussed. They celebrate his birthday, for instance. He didn't seem to do it to escape them, but more likely himself. So Lawrence's mom is very permissive and tolerant of his moods because he's prone to some of the same challenges, perhaps, that his father had. And when we finally see a scene squarely in the middle of the film where Lawrence has a full-on panic attack at work with his mom talking him down through a locked door, we realize that there's a deep love there, both ways. And frankly, I felt a bit guilty, not just witnessing it, but for judging these characters, either of them, before.
Okay, I want you to close your eyes and just imagine. Just imagine an ocean. Just imagine the ocean in Castaway. Okay? You still like that movie, right?
It's
Remember to breathe. Okay? And you tell Wilson what the water's like.
It's warm.
That's great. What else?
It's blue.
Yep, it's blue.
The movie is basically a walking lesson in don't judge anyone till you've walked a mile in their shoes. But it slips it in there in a way that's super effective and unexpected. So kudos to Chandler Levack and, of course, to the talented actors. The film is also that sort of coming-of-age story, a last hurrah before growing up, that harkens back to movies like American Graffiti, thematically at least, with a teaspoon, maybe a dash, a pinch of Summer of 42 thrown in there, just, with Lawrence's crush on his manager, played by Romina D'Ugo, who's very believable in the role as his manager and eventual friend. She has a standout scene that's actually pretty formidable. Several moments, actually, where she's really very good. Be nice to see her in more roles like that.
Oh, you remind me of him. He went to Tisch School of the Arts. So then I did. I went to his hotel and I went into his room, but the lights were all off and he was just like sitting there in the dark. So now it's just like me and him in the dark. And I can't get him off me. So, the movie gets delayed, and then Jonah replaces me with this girl on the WB, and I spend the next 6 years living in LA, and I don't book a single other thing except for this one dumb pilot until I just rack up so much debt that I have to move back in with my parents and I start working here. So, yeah, I hate movies.
And she has her own arc, as her time knowing Lawrence at the video store sends her life spinning off in a new direction as well. Interesting writing with these characters. All along we get echoes from Alana's past, her character's name is Alana, of what Lawrence's future in the film industry might hold, and how it probably will pan out for a poor kid from the suburbs of nowhere, instead of what... I just lost the light. Okay. For every Tarantino who quits the video store and makes Reservoir Dogs, there's 1,000 actors dreaming of careers, and at least as many would-be young writer-directors of various levels of raw talent who just need the dream. Maybe just to survive high school. Maybe just to survive a trauma. And that's okay. Finally, these relationships wind down. And his friend Matt, for instance, aligns himself with a girl at school, another filmmaker whose attention and just kindness, frankly, pulls him away from his friendship with Lawrence. Finally, the manager goes out to find another career, finally releasing herself from the world of movies. She was still sort of clinging to that part of herself in a way by working at sequels. And Lawrence himself realizes that he's never going to NYU. He never was going. And his grudging backup application to a local college might just be what he needs. Maybe all he can really handle. Certainly all he can afford. And he's learned, we see, just a little on his first day at college, to listen, to accept people, to see them as reflections a little bit of himself. And that's something that he learned from Alana. They've each transformed the other in a way, and they finally appreciate that in a really nice scene at the end where they bump into each other at a subway. This sort of thing made the film deeply nuanced by the end. And I honestly was a bit confused because this sort of plot, generally speaking, will come to us from a male perspective. Or we would get an autobiographical account like we got with Spielberg's similar story in The Fabelmans. And often the character's success is a fait accompli. But then I stumbled on an interview with the director, whose first name, frankly, had me imagining a young male director, and the film being maybe self-referential. But Chandler Levack is a woman, and the film is probably still self-referential. But she wanted to show not only could she write a man, but maybe more honestly than a man could, because as a woman, she doesn't casually ignore the arrogance and the flaws of such a character, or their vulnerability, on the other hand. And so we get this incredibly well-rounded 360-degree view of someone who by the end is just disassembled in front of us, self-disassembled, as he tries to piece back together his identity, again in order to survive and move forward. Not just survive the usual trauma of high school, but maybe the individual trauma of his unique family dynamic that we see here. And she did just that, the director. And with some really natural acting supporting her, some wonderful portrayals here by Isaiah Lehtinen, and I'm going to massacre these names, Percy Hynes White, Krista Bridges, Romina D'Ugo, Cupid, and several others who just fit their roles beautifully. The movie just breathes like life at times and reminds you of high school and lends the power of its drama that much more impact when it happens because of these talented people. It also looks like a film that everyone had a blast making together. The video store, I heard, was reconstructed with furnishings from a real disused Blockbuster and then reassembled in a warehouse somewhere. The sets are mostly small and contained so as not to blow the period look and the budget. And that sort of intimate, personal, creative work often comes through here in the performances. It looks like they had a good time. There are many references to Stanley Kubrick movies. I don't know whether it's because Kubrick is the focus of so much film geekery or out of genuine affection for him. I suspect a little of both. In the very end, when Lawrence is getting his head shaved to deal with a skin infection that he's developed, it's a little bit out of left field, but just before leaving his old identity behind to go off to college is an obvious Full Metal Jacket moment. Lawrence himself, perhaps a Private Pile type of character who was redeemed before it was too late. Maybe. In the end, though, as is often the case here on this channel, the movie is also a love letter to parenting. Even though that's just a small aspect of the narrative, it's a critical one too. It's a good, imperfect, no good deed goes unpunished parental sort of tolerance and perseverance. And you get the nod that eventually your kids do step back and see where they're from, and see themselves, and maybe just see you a little bit. Maybe just as they're taking those first steps out into the real world. And that maybe makes it all worth it. So special call out to Krista Bridges, the mom, who with only a few scenes added that whole layer of honesty to the film. So if you're looking for this film, at the time of this video anyway, it's free on Canopy. All you do is plug in your library card and you get to watch free movies. And it's also on Prime, Apple TV, and YouTube movies, each of those around $3 or $4. If you ever had that movie bug, you might enjoy this film just for that. But more than that, if you've ever found a high schooler insufferable, there's another possible audience there for the film. And if you were that insufferable movie geek high schooler or ever parented one, double whammy, then you might just want to check this out. I Like Movies by Chandler Levack. Have a look, and we'll see you soon.